How's it going, guys? Got a really good question the other day from a subscriber. He wanted to know what I preferred in bullet weights for the 9mm for self-defense. And if you guys have followed my channel for any length of time, you already know the answer to that question. And that is that I love the 124 grain Spear Gold Dot Plus P round. This is my go-to round for concealed carry and for home defense in the 9mm. It's just a fantastic loading. That bullet performs very, very, very well in most of your tests. It is bonded, and it's a fantastic, fantastic bullet. Now, why do I choose 124 grain? Well, that is the question that he asked. So why do I choose 124 grain? Well, let's talk a little bit about it. Okay, so here's an example of 115 grain 9mm. This is the, if I can get my camera to focus, this is the 115 grain jacketed hollow point from Corbon. This is a plus P loading. This one puts out at over 450 foot-pounds of energy at well over 300 feet per second. So this is a smoking round. This is a super, super powerful loading. This is pretty much, 115 grain is pretty much your standard lighter for caliber loading. You can get more exotic loadings such as the 104 grains. You can also, I think Federal puts out a 104 grain bullet, like the expanding full metal jacket. You can also get like loadings down to like 90 grain bullets, things like that. But I really, really recommend staying away from anything lighter than the 115 grain. Another standard weight for the 9mm is the 147 grain, and that is on the heavier for caliber side. You can get loadings that are heavier than the 147 grain, but for the most part, that's your standard heavy for caliber loading. This one is a 147 grain Federal HST. So your intermediate loading is your 124 grain bullet. You can also get them pretty commonly. You can get it for 124. You can get a 125 grain bullet, but for the most part, the 124 grain is your intermediate load. Less common loadings is like this loading here, which is the Critical Duty by Hornady. This is a 135 grain bullet. So you can get several 135 grain. In fact, I think I have another 135 grain. Here's another loading for 135 grain. That's the Federal Hydra-Shock. There's other intermediate loadings. So this is 135 grain, and this is actually a phenomenal round. You know, I've done a ballistics test with this one, and it performed really well. So that's really your standard weights in your 9mm. There are other, like I said, there are other variations. There's other weights as well, but for the most part, those are your standard. Your 115 grain is your light loading. Your 124 grain is your intermediate loading, and your 147 grain is your most common heavy for caliber loading. So that's your standard loads. So what is the advantage and what is the disadvantage of going light versus going heavy? Well, for the most part, and we're going to talk in general terms, guys, because every company has different loadings, and different loadings are going to kind of perform a bit differently. But we're just going to talk in general ballistics terms here. Usually, okay, rule number one, usually if the bullet is lighter and faster, you're going to get more violent and explosive expansion, but get less penetration, okay? So rule number one, if you have a fast-moving, lighter bullet, you're going to have more violent expansion and less penetration. Okay, so that's your lighter grains. So with this hot Corbon, you're going to get more violent expansion but less overall penetration with it. Now, with your 147 grain or your heavier loading, the rule is that because it's going a bit slower because it's heavier, it's that slower velocity is going to cause less violent expansion. So it's going to be more mild expansion, okay? And because of that, it's not going to have as much surface area as, say, like a smaller, say as a lighter bullet, and it's going to have a tendency to penetrate more because, one, it didn't expand as much, and two, it's going to have greater mass. So it's going to be able to carry its momentum further into tissue. So the general rule is for the 147 grain is that it's going to have less expansion, more penetration. Okay, so that covers the light and heavy weights. So what about the intermediate? Well, what I like about the intermediates is that you get a little bit of both. Okay, you have a little higher velocity, and you're going to have a bit more hydrostatic shock to the tissue. Okay, more shock to the tissue, a bit more expansion than the 147 grain, and you're going to have a little bit more mass to carry it a little bit deeper. So you're going to have a nice little intermediate between the characteristics of the light and the heavy. So that's why I like to go with 124 grain, is because you're going to have you're going to have the best of kind of both worlds. And so I really recommend that you carry a 124 grain bullet. You can get them in standard pressures. This is a plus P round, but you can get 124 grain in standard pressures, and I really recommend that you do that, because I think for the most part the 124 grain is a really good year-round overall weight for the 9mm. Anyway, guys, hopefully you guys found that interesting. So don't forget to rate the video, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts on what you carry and some of the reasoning behind what you carry, because that way if people roll into this video with some questions, they can check out the comments and see what other people are doing. But anyway, also, guys, don't forget to share the video with your friends. It does help the video out, and it does help our channel grow, and I really, really appreciate it. And as always, guys, thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video. See ya. The Handgun Basics series that I've been talking about, I mentioned that I use the M&P 9mm as a home defense gun, and that's my primary home defense gun. And they've asked me, why do I choose a 9mm over a 45 ACP? And so I kind of want to get into, I want to kind of address that question in this video, and just kind of explain why I choose it. Okay.